Watch almost any match featuring the Brazilian national team, and you will see a fascinating contradiction. First, a player will pull off a dizzying complex dribble that leaves a defender frozen. Then, seconds later, after the slightest brush of contact, that same player drops to the ground in an exaggerated theatrical dive. Modern Brazilian superstars have become the ultimate embodiment of this duality on the global stage. Players like Neymar Jr. are revered for their jaw-dropping creativity, yet intensely polarizing for their antics. This 2014 Wall Street Journal article highlights the divide. The authors calculated what they called writhing time to rank nations based on how long players spent embellishing injuries. In Western sports media, these behaviors are categorized as a lack of sportsmanship, pure cheating. Framing this as a moral failure misses the actual cognitive mechanics at work. The deception used to manipulate a referee springs from the same cognitive engine that produces their elite creativity. To understand how Brazilian players process the game, we must discard Western notions of fair play. Instead, we need to decode two foundational concepts: the physical movement vocabulary known as Ginga and the controversial mindset of Malandragem. We can trace the roots of this mindset back to the 1880s, shortly after the abolition of slavery in Brazil. In deeply unequal, marginalized communities, a culture of street smarts emerged. This was Malandragem, the art of cunning. The archetype of the Malandro became a kind of folk anti-hero. This was an individual who bent the rules and used deception to outsmart a rigged, corrupt socioeconomic system. If the rules of society were built to oppress you, bending them was a required survival tactic. Over time, this survival tactic permeated the national identity. The drive to outsmart the system became celebrated. The legendary Brazilian midfielder Gerson even popularized a famous catchphrase for a TV commercial: "I like to get an advantage in everything." That intellectual cunning eventually found a physical manifestation. When a Malandro moves, they use Ginga. Translated literally as sway, it's a highly fluid, joint-heavy style of moving the ankles, knees, and hips. The mechanics of Ginga are directly linked to Afro-Brazilian cultural rituals. You see it heavily in capoeira, a martial art historically disguised as a dance, which relies on sweeping, unpredictable movements to confuse an opponent. You also see this same fluidity heavily featured in the rhythmic posture of samba. The physical vocabulary of deception, fluidity, and rhythm permeates Brazilian life long before a child ever steps onto a football pitch. Ginga and Malandragem are not drills invented by football coaches. They are centuries-old survival mechanisms and cultural expressions integrated into the Brazilian physical identity. Brazilian youth test these cultural traits in the pelada, the unstructured pickup street football games found in neighborhoods across the country. The physical constraints of the pelada are severe. Kids are playing barefoot on uneven waste grounds or jagged cobblestone streets. They are often navigating small spaces against much older, more aggressive players. Decades ago, the motor scientist Nikolai Bernstein proposed that true physical dexterity isn't about perfect standard form. Dexterity is the ability to find a creative motor solution to survive any condition. In the pelada, standard form goes out the window. To avoid injury and keep the ball, a player has to constantly scan their environment, reading the defender's balance and weight distribution. Cognitive scientists call this perception-action coupling. The player takes in spatial data and adapts their physical movement in a fraction of a second. By utilizing the swaying movements of Ginga, the attacker feeds the defender fake visual clues, what researchers call non-specifying affordances. The attacker drops a shoulder, the defender commits their weight to the wrong side, and the true path instantly opens up. Inside the pelada, subverting expectations or deceiving an opponent isn't shameful. Through the lens of Malandragem, tricking the opposition is celebrated as the ultimate display of intellect and mastery over a hostile environment. Now, take those deeply ingrained survival skills and place them on the manicured grass of a global stadium. When a modern Brazilian star feints past a defender, disguises a pass, or theatrically embellishes a foul to manipulate the referee, they are executing the exact same historical survival script. This organic, chaos-driven development is entirely alien to the way players are trained in Western nations, where physical education models emphasize structured drills, sanitized environments, and rigid adherence to the rules. According to this syllabus, an intelligent performer must transcend the reproduction of physical templates. True mastery requires high-level cognitive functioning, the ability to critically interpret an environment and adapt to dynamic performance contexts. You cannot separate the mesmerizing brilliance of Brazilian football from its history of struggle. Demanding these players conform to standard sanitized rules is demanding they abandon the very engine of deception that makes them the best in the world.